Soundstage is basically just where the music is laid out in front of you, the width of it, the height of it, the depth of it from front to back. Ooh, that's almost a 3D effect. Woo! Mike Castle with Archive Stereo. And, this one, I'm gonna try to make this a shorter video. I know my videos go a little long, so we're gonna see what we can do on this. But yeah, so here's the thing. I don't know what sort of algorithm has been doing this, but I have been getting a ton in my YouTube feed of stuff about Soundstage. And there's nothing wrong with the information in them, but they seem to miss a very key thing. And I think a key thing, particularly for new people, either people who are getting back into this after many years out of it, or people who are new to home audio, to two-channel audio. So what I want to do is I want to talk about Soundstage. And I talked about this in my video on sources, which is actually one of my favorite videos, sources for evaluating equipment, how to use them, and gives about 9 sources that are really good. On this, I should say also, please subscribe. I'm trying to grow the channel and doing this really for the love of it right now, and hoping it takes off. But anyway, Soundstage. All right, so here maybe this can prove valuable. There are enough new people out there, by the way, who I think merits that we have a discussion that's maybe this basic. So people don't always understand this. So here's what I'm saying. So when you see videos about Soundstage, the ones that have been popping up, I've been seeing, have been all talking about placement of speakers. Some of them talk about equipment, but it's mostly centered around placement of speakers. Paul McGowan, who I speak very, very highly of, and I love watching Paul McGowan's videos. I wish I was as prolific and as intelligent as Paul McGowan. But he does a lot about, he talks about 2 different kinds of separation. One, where you have your speakers about 8 feet apart from each other. Another one where you have them really wide, and to him they'll affect 2 different kinds of things. And he talks about the equilateral triangle between, this is actually backwards here. Here's the speakers, and here's you as the listener, in this sort of golden triangle setting, which a lot of us do, and that all makes sense. Then there's another video, I forget the person who did a very nice job, very, I mean, compared to my little homemade stuff, it was very well produced and everything like that, talking again about speaker placement, and move your speakers out from the wall seems to be their biggest advice, which, by the way, I've heard Soundstage with speakers pretty darn close to the wall, so already that's a little different. But bring your speakers out from the wall. It's to decouple it from the bass. But then again, there are speakers that are ported in the front or ported at the bottom that come out through the front, so that's not as big of an issue. And then there's omnidirectional types of speakers, the Ohm Walsh style speaker, it comes to mind. So anyway, okay, I'm digressing, but not really, because I am still staying on this topic. But and then towing them in just ever so slightly, okay, and I talks about that too. All of these things are great. All of these things are true. All of these things make sense. But here's the one thing that bothers me so much in these discussions, and that is what I've said in my video on sources, and I've said it in other things, that the soundstage begins. The soundstage begins in the source. And I'm not talking about the streamer or the tone arm or the turntable or the CD player, although those matter as well. But I mean the recording, whether it's a LP, whether it's a CD, whether it's a cassette tape, or an 8-track, or if it is, what most of us are doing, high-res streaming or low-res streaming, whatever you're doing. That is where the soundstage is done. So when you get this idea that if you set your speakers up this way and do this and put them there and all of that, you're going to get this soundstage, and some of them will even have like a demonstration stream or a demonstration CD that you can do, and they'll say, see, when they're set up like this, here you hear whoop, you hear it over there to the left, and boop, you hear it over there, to the right, and boop, it's high, and boop, it's low, it's in the center, whatever that is. Well, that is because, not just because of the way the speakers are placed, but that's because before, to get those sounds that way, you had to place them within the stereo spectrum, okay? And the stereo spectrum is kind of this illusion, kind of this magic that happens from having one speaker over here and one speaker over here. If you have it in a mono system without stereo, without the two channels, two speakers, but mono, you'll get everything in the center, okay? It'll just mix there in the center. But when you have stereo, you have the right channel and you have the left channel. That might appear differently because I'm facing my little camera here. But whatever, just this side and this side. And stuff that is moved over to this side is going to appear more over to this side, where stuff is moved over, the proper word we want to use is pan, will appear there. And stuff that is in the center with that magical thing that's on every sound editor's, audio engineer's desk. And I think one of the most important, actually, after, you got effects, sense, and volume, and gain, and all that. So it's all important. But to me, for stereo, for our purposes, it's that pan knob. Or it could be a slider, but it's mostly a knob. And that pan knob that either puts, if the pan is in the center, and this is, by the way, a filmic term, right? When a camera pans left and right, that's what you're doing. You're making that audio in a stereo system pan left or right. You can't do that in a mono system, but you're doing that in the stereo field between those two speakers. That pan is just super important. So if I want the vocals, like on a nice Diana Krall, "Only Trust Your Heart" album, which is one of my favorite sources, and her voice is right there in the center, and it's so crisp, and it's close mic'd, and you hear it really well. It's beautifully focused and that. But that pan on the track that her voice was on, or I don't know if they double tracked it or whatever, but those were centered. Those were right in the center of the pan switch. And then, for example, in that example, to the stage right, but to my left, to the left over here, I am hearing the hi-hat, and that means that on the hi-hat, when that was mic'd, the pan was twisted over, not all the way over, because it's not like way out there. Doing a lot of movement in this. This could actually become an exercise video as well. Whatever's going to bring more subscribers, please like, comment, and subscribe. Again, I can't say that enough. But so that's what that pan is. So you can be in the center, or you can have things slightly to the right, or more to the right, or so far to the right that you're almost hearing it way outside of the speakers. And then the same thing, with that pan button's the same pan knob. I'm using a different hand on it this time. And you have it slightly to the left, a little over to the left, or hard left, hard right, hard left. And that's when you get stuff like, if you listen to the Santana Abraxas album, there's a lot of stuff that's in the percussion that is hard left and hard right. Actually, it was probably more of an atmospheric thing, but so that's how you get something in the stereo spectrum. It depends on where you, as the audio engineer, before anyone is ever listening to this, you're listening to it in the studio, you're listening to it off the digital recording, or in the past, when a lot of these recordings that I listened to were made off of the 2-inch tape or whatever they're using. Is that video? I don't know. All right. Anyway, so that's how they do this. So that in the master, in the 2-track master, that's where you start to pan things over. So when you record it, unless you're doing a live recording and capturing a band, then you do have to think about those things. But it's mostly in post-production after you're doing that, and where you're putting that in the stereo spectrum. This, in addition to how you've mic'd it, Is the mic far away? Is the mic close? Um, and levels and all of those things to get height and there's ways of with the distance of getting depth of sound within a sound recording. But again, the main thing is all of that is in there, and all of this to say that I want you to not feel bad when you think you've set up your system properly. And oh yeah, that's what I hear over to the far right, and that's what I hear to the far left, and that's what I hear up there and there and in that. Not all recordings are going to do those things if they didn't hard pan anything or whatever, You're only going to get that if the recording did that. So that is primarily, no matter, I thought of a real ridiculous way to explain this, but it would be like saying, if you put your speakers this way and then turn them like this, you will hear the guitar, okay? But if there's no guitar in the recording, you will not hear a guitar no matter what you do with your speakers, what you buy, whatever you do, unless you buy a guitar and play it live while you're listening to your thing. So, but that's the way of thinking it. It's like saying Soundstage is there because you've done this with your speakers and because you bought that piece of equipment. First and foremost, it's not going to be a tremendous soundstage or a crappy soundstage unless in the original recording, the way that it was, the way things were positioned in the stereo spectrum, that you did that. You can prove this to yourself by listening to various sources. So, for instance, with Diana Krall, I know exactly where that hi-hat is going to be as long as my system is wired upright, right to left, and I haven't switched any of those things. I know that hi-hat's going to be there. I told you the story about walking into a place and I was hearing the hi-hat over to the right, to my right. And I was saying, well, you got your system backwards. Oh, how do you know? Because I've listened to this a million times. The hi-hat's over there and you got it over there. So we know that, right? World Sinfonia, the album by Al Di Meola, the seventh cut on that, No Mystery. When you listen to that, it isn't because of the way I set up my speakers. It's because in the recording studio, and Al Di Meola, I think, does a lot of his own production. By the way, Al Di Meola albums, especially after the first three, but even the first three, are amazing for stereo separation and soundstage. They're beautiful. World Sinfonia from the 90s, the early 90s. It's great. But you will hear that after the intro, Al's lone acoustic guitar is going to appear to the left of the left speaker, you facing it to the left of the left speaker and slightly up, because that's the way that it was put into the recording. Whether I set my speakers up 8 feet apart or 7 feet apart or 20 feet apart, if I set them 20 feet apart, that's going to probably be too far. And I don't know what happens when you do that. I think it'll nullify everything, but I don't know. I that part I don't know. Because you should never set your speakers that far apart in the room. I mean, maybe you can get this cool wall of sound, but according to McGowan, everything's then going to appear in between the speakers. But that's how it's going to be. Now, yes, you can set your speakers up so badly. You put them 4 feet apart, toe them out this way, face them down, connect them up wrong. There are tons of things you can do to screw up that thing. But most systems, even the most modest of system, except for this system that I have in my living room, we're gonna cut in that picture of it, that little portable with the speakers that are about less than 24 inches apart and cannot be moved. Unless you have that, that's never going to do a good stereo effect at all. But most speakers, separate speakers and that you have a reasonable distance apart, sitting in that equilateral triangle, you're going to notice that. Other things. I think one of the best albums to show the idea of slight panning, not hard panning like that one is in Al Di Meola's. It's an album called, I think it's called Larry and Lee, or Lee and Larry. It's a Lee Ritenour album that includes Lee Ritenour, the guitar player, and Larry Carlton, the guitar player. And again, I think it's from the 90s. But it is a wonderful jazz album. It's a wonderful jazz album. But the other thing that it does is they put Larry Carlton not in the center, and they put Lee Ritenour not in the center, but they put Lee over to my listener's right, and they put Larry over to my listener's ears left, but not all the way. And they also, the way that it was mic'd and the care that they took with it, they are highly focused, and even a decent system with the speaker set up, because of the way that they recorded, you get a beautiful, just guitar that is, the term they'll often say is, it's not in the speaker. You want the speakers to disappear. That means that it's not so right that it's in the left speaker and in the right speaker, but it's like between center and right, and between center and left, the other guitar, and you hear it, and it's beautiful when that happens. It's absolutely beautiful. But that is a result of the recording, and then of you putting your speakers in properly, and then other things falling in place. But like I said, I don't want you to think, when you hear other people talking about this, please don't think that just because you set your speaker up and on some stuff you hear stuff, well, that's pretty hard right, and that's pretty hard left, or you hear most of it in the center without any definition. There are things that could make that part of your equipment, but most of the thing is that just because you set up your speakers and the test recording puts all these sounds there, do not for a minute think that every single thing that you play is going to be like that. It's going to vary from source to source. It's going to vary from source to source, because the Soundstage, I don't know if I operationalized Soundstage, but I have done it before, but let me do it again. Soundstage is basically just where the music is laid out in front of you, the width of it, the height of it, the depth of it from front to back. Ooh, that's almost a 3D effect. Woo! Okay, so anyway, and then within that Soundstage, the focus of instruments, which is also a part of something that is called separation, and that's why. If you've ever heard of the term monoblocks, where we have one amplifier driving one speaker and one amplifier driving another, that's almost the best you can get, because you have no crosstalk between those. Unless somewhere down the line, of course, in your preamp you have a little crosstalk, or in a cheap phono cartridge you have a little crosstalk, and where the things are getting mixed up. So there's all kinds of things that can do this. What I want you to think of with Soundstage is not, this is how I'm going to make my Soundstage sound like this. Because really all you got to do, seriously, Paul McGowan is right, put them 8 feet apart, toe them in other words, so that the edges of them are coming out at a little triangle toward you, so like they're kind of focused toward you. I've actually had success towing them out. But that's very controversial and very weird, and that may just be my brain or the way my room is, most likely. But I have had some success with that. But as long as you keep them about 8 feet apart, slightly towed in, or even just flat like that, and sit in that equilateral triangle, you'll probably be able to get that. What you think of the speakers and all the other stuff, including down to the cabling that you're using, is either going to enhance the Soundstage that's on the recording, or it's going to detract from it. Okay, so first of all, it's either in the recording or it's not. The guitar is there or the guitar is not there. If the guitar is not there, no matter what you do, you're not going to hear it. But let's say that it's there. Okay, the Soundstage is there. So then it's the source. Like for instance, if you're using a streamer, are they using a different DAC for each channel? Maybe like Eversolo uses, or is the isolation or the in the discrete channels of each thing really good? If you're using a turntable, are you using a cheap cartridge where the separation isn't all that great? Or using a great cartridge where you're not going to have that problem in the preamp. And by the way, I do want to mention one thing about preamps. I have found the main thing with me, outside of the speakers themselves, outside of the source first and foremost, and then outside of the speakers themselves, I have found one of the most important things to getting that soundstage really nice and focused and tight, where it's not just here and there, but then your stuff is really focused as to where it's coming from in that soundstage, which is kind of a different thing. I found a preamplifier is a good preamplifier is one of the things for that. I had some of the best listening experiences in my life when I owned a Conrad Johnson PV1. It was one of the first revivals of the tube preamp, and it was amazing. It was some of the best sounding stuff still to this day that I've ever achieved in my own home stereo. And it didn't really matter too much what amp I was using, but that preamp was magic, and one of my greatest. I hate the fact that I sold that, and I sold it way too cheap when I sold it long ago. But that was a wonderful preamp. So I do find that preamps help, but I do think speakers are a problem. Not so much their placement, although the placement matters, of course, as well, but just the way the baffles are and things. Speakers can get out of the way or not. I have that situation right now. I have some very nice speakers in my bedroom listening, which is my main listening situation. I can do another video on and talking about why I feel that's a great place to listen. But in my living room system, in my other studio, if you will, in my living room system, I have these old DCM TF350s, and they just do an incredible job of positioning things. So while yes, it's the same soundstage, and Al Di Meola's guitar is up over there to the upper left when it cuts in, or Larry and Larry are playing, just away from the center, or Diana Krall's beautiful voice is right there in the center. Yes, but they're so much more focused with those DCMs, and they were really cheap. So speakers do matter in that. I have an integrated amp that I'm using in the living room. I have my Macintosh MA6100. What I'm doing is I'm running the source, which is just a WIM digital streamer. I still have to do that review. A WIM that is going out from the preamp into a crossover, an active crossover unit, old Tapco one, which seems to be working really nice, and then coming out of that and feeding into the amp and feeding everything above 150 hertz into the DCMs is coming from that. And then everything below that is going to a little cheap, I think it's Fosse, little D, Class D amp feeding a really cheap subwoofer, a passive subwoofer. And I'll talk about that system separately in another video, but it's pretty cool. But anyway, so, and the only reason I did that, and this is how much I love my DCMs, there is some resonance that's happening, and it must be something below 150 hertz. So I had to get the 150 hertz and lower out of the DCMs, and that's what I did with, and that's why it's such an elaborate system. But yes, that is a decent preamp in that MA6100, even though it shares a chassis with the amp. It's equivalent to, like, I think it's the C26 or something like that. I'm not sure. I'll edit that in here and put that. Well, this video is getting longer than I wanted it to be, but it's not going to be 40 minutes. I'll tell you that, because I'm almost done with this. But anyway, so those are things that can affect that. Then, of course, the power amp, and if it's a true stereo power amp, and is there good separation? Do they have separate power supplies? So all of these things affect this. It's a symbiotic relationship, but again, it is the source. And all of this to say, again, set your mind at ease that yes, your speakers are probably correct. Yes, you don't have to fiddle with them so much. If you're doing the equilateral triangle, you're going to be fine. And yeah, but you're not always going to get this cool soundstage with stuff to the left of the speakers and stuff to the right of the speakers. By that I mean, if you want to hear what it sounds like when you have something well to the right of the speaker, get the Jaco Pastorius debut album, just simply titled Jaco, and listen to the Third Cut Continuum. This is available on every streaming platform, as is the Larry and Lee, and as is the World Sinfonia album. All of these are readily available. When you listen to Continuum, the electric piano is so far to the right, from my listeners' right, that it's like in another room almost. And that's the other thing of speakers having to be out in the room in order to get that full effect. I have seen in my examples, in my humble examples, I do not have incredibly expensive equipment, but in my humble examples here, I have seen it where the soundstage goes back and it goes beyond the walls, okay, or appears to go beyond the walls. So you can have a deep sound stage even if you're not entirely away, as long as you're decoupling the bass, as long as you're not ported out the back, or you've got a system that is really boomy and then it's being reinforced by the back wall. But I mean, it is better to bring them out. I bring all my speakers more out into the room than not. But anyway, yeah. So you're gonna get those sometimes, but sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're not. And you know, like sometimes you're gonna listen to stuff from like jazz from the 50s and 60s. You know, like if you're listening to the one that everybody listens to, Kind of Blue. You know, it's like, oh yeah, I know jazz because I have Kind of Blue. Okay, all right. So that's the one that people listen to. To me, one of the best jazz albums for that experience is actually Milt Jackson's Bags and Train, which is wonderful. John Coltrane and Milt Jackson, and I think from those eras were like, you know, they were kind of in the speaker a little bit, or near the speaker but behind them when you have a good system. So and then of course you get like the stuff like which you can stream anywhere. One of my favorite albums in the world, Grand Funk Railroad. They were from Flint. I'm from Flint. You know, that's a big deal. Grand Funk Railroad, Closer to Home. The first song, starts out with a little acoustic guitar, and then you get the Mark Farner screaming. But they switch literally from left to right, and they did a lot of that stuff in the psychedelic era and in the rock era, where you know just that's taking that pan button and just whoop whoop while you have a single track going, and that's kind of actually ridiculous because it would mean in real life you've got to have Mark Farner running here and then jumping, 8 feet over to the other side, but still, you know, it was kind of cool when you were, you know, 9 and listening to that sort of stuff. But you know, so yeah, you'll hear that. But again, all of these are because of the way that the album is recorded. So don't feel bad if you've set up your system. You've probably set it up right, but you are not going to get that sound stage the same every time. It's just you have the potential for it, okay? And the more you have your equipment that doesn't detract from it. It's like cabling, right? Everybody's, oh, cables don't matter. I use lamp cord. Okay, that's fine. I'm using very cheap cables right now in my living room system, and it's really not bothering me that much. But the idea with it is that not that a cable enhances something. It's not going to make the guitar there. It's not going to make the sound stage there. But if it doesn't detract from it, if it leaves things alone, if the way the wires are, if the way the dielectric wraps around it, all of these sorts of things, you will have you'll have less interference with the signal. Okay, if you have good separation in your power amp, you'll have less interference that impedes that stuff that's in the source. Okay. The same thing with resolution. You're never going to get resolution that wasn't there from the mic. You want to hear resolution and know if your system is having decent resolution or not. Get the Stan Getz Captain Marvel album, done in the 70s. Chick Corea's on it, which is how I got introduced to Stan Getz, even though Stan Getz was before Chick Corea, but he played with them. And go to the cut, I've talked about this one before in other videos, go to the cut Crystal Silence. And you will hear, in a really good, really revealing system, this amazing in-breath before a few of the longer horn blows going on in that song. Particularly, it happens a lot in the beginning. I think there's 7 or 8 of them that you can hear. And when you hear that, you know that you've got good resolution. But if that wasn't recorded, if that wasn't captured on the mic in the recording, it's not going to be there. So resolution is just like Soundstage. If it wasn't put in the mix that way, you're not going to hear it. So be kind to yourself, be good to yourself, and listen to those 3 or 4 sources. And if you're getting that, or listen to your test CD or your test stream, and if you're getting it from there, you know, one of the ones that everyone's listening to, and I heard it first from Adrian Lowe, is Francine 13's Queen Mary. That gives you panning and gives you this beautiful centering voice, and bass comes from here, comes from there. Oh gosh, beautiful stuff. Great stuff to listen to. So, you know, check these things out, and but you're fine. If you have a soundstage, your soundstage is not going to do fantastic, amazing things. You will not have the wall of sound always. Okay, you know, but you will get it if you do just the basic things. I'm one of those people. I don't like to fiddle with stuff that much. I like to set it up quick, and you know, maybe I'll measure how far my front baffle is from the rear wall, and that's about it. You know, I don't measure things out. You know, with my tube stuff, I don't put different tubes in or whatever unless they're burned out. And then of course you have to do it. I'm not into all of that kind of, but some people are. For them, that's what the hobby is. They like to fiddle with it and they like to do it. You know, and that's great. You know, go ahead. But you know, so. That's what I'm saying with setting this up. Soundstage does not have to be a big mystery, okay? Get your speakers about 8 feet apart. If you got a wider room, and if you're sitting back further, get them a little further apart. Do that equilateral triangle, towing in just maybe ever so slightly, you know, putting them towing in versus towing out. Towing in just a little bit. Try it a couple different ways. If you love experimenting with it, that's great. If not, you know, you don't. But Soundstage, always remember, it starts with the source. It starts with the source. Okay. All right. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe.